I'm Trish Roberts, and you're watching Faint Signals from Vega. So I thought I'd come on briefly and talk about an article which someone pointed out to me on Facebook just about half an hour ago, and I thought it was quite interesting and sort of demonstrates very clearly the sentience of non-human animals. Of course, we see sentience very obviously all the time in animals, but we just choose to ignore them because we've been indoctrinated to believe that that they are here for us to use. And this particular article that this person pointed out to me is about a cow who escaped on the way to a slaughterhouse, smashed through a metal fence, broke the arm of a man trying to catch her, then swims safely to an island in a lake. Now, you've probably heard of cows escaping slaughterhouses every so often. This happens. It happened, I remember, I don't really pay much attention to mainstream media, but I remember accidentally seeing an article where a cow had escaped a slaughterhouse in New York State, and it was running down the main street of a city. And people were cheering the cow on, to get to safety. And it's interesting, isn't it, how we recognize that animals are sentient. We recognize that animal, this particular animal, this cow that escaped on the way to the slaughterhouse and went through great effort to keep safe, to keep herself safe. Breaking in the arm of the man trying to catch her. I'll just read you a little bit from this article because it's really quite amazing. And when we think about it, every single cow, every single pig, every single goat, every single chicken, and so forth, they all want to live and they do not want to be killed. That's very clear if you've ever been to a slaughterhouse. It's a horror house, no matter how much people like to pretend that it's quote unquote humane. They are horror houses. And every second of every day, a sentient animal is being killed. And the reason they're being killed is because we're not vegan. That's why they're there, because we create demand for animal products, for flesh, for dairy, for eggs, for leather, for fur, for wool, for all kinds of animal products that we don't need. We don't need animal products to survive, and we can easily meet all our nutrition requirements from plants and other non-animal sources. So the only reason we're creating this horror, for example, for this particular cow and all the cows that didn't escape the slaughterhouse and all the other animals that don't get to escape a slaughterhouse, the only reason they're there is because we're not vegan. So we're creating tremendous violence, horror, for these sentient animals, and all for trivial reasons of mostly palate pleasure or habit or convenience or tradition. So I'll just briefly sort of read some of this article about this cow who escaped from this slaughterhouse and went to great lengths and even swam to an island to be safe. It's said, and interestingly, even though they know the cow is a female, they keep referring to the cow as an it in this article, which just shows how much we try to keep sentient animals, even though we this is about sentience, this article. Even when we recognize that it's about sentience, we want to keep those animals other, and this is the crux of a lot of our problems today, is otherization of humans, otherization of non-humans, so that then we can exploit them and use them and kill them. So otherization is at the center of a lot of our problems today. Discrimination, heterosexism, sexism, racism, speciesism in this case, classism, and so forth. So, if we recognize that certain forms of discrimination are wrong, then all forms of discrimination are wrong when we base it on an irrelevant criterion. And in this case, it's species. So I'll just read a little bit of this, and just gives you an idea of the lengths to which this cow went to because they, excuse me, because they are sentient and they want to live. So a local politician reportedly agreed, and this is an interesting thing, reminds me of the gladiator things where the emperor kind of puts their thumb down if a gladiator or whatever doesn't, or whatever, whoever is in the arena in the days of the Roman Empire doesn't get to live. This kind of some sort of, this power thing. So a local politician reportedly agrees to let animal live after its ordeal captures public attention. So a cow has been living alone on an island, attacking anyone who comes near after staging a miraculous escape on its way, this is his word, its way to a slaughterhouse. The animal made its bid for safety last month after it refused to get into a lorry, taking it to be killed for meat. Instead, it rammed a metal fence before making a dash for the nearby Lake Nysa, South Poland. After the cow's owner, and there we go again, a cow's owner, that cow is a sentient being, and yet it's viewed as property because we view non-human animals as property. So that cow in our society is seen as having an owner, just like, an owner and a slave. So after the cow's owner, known as Mr. Lukatz, attempted to get it back to the farm, the cow broke one of his workers' arms, according to Polish news. When firefighters used a boat to get to the island, the cow swam 50 meters to a neighboring peninsula. The deputy commander of the fire brigade in Nysa said the animal was frightened but healthy. A vet was called in to tranquilize the animal, but ran out of gas cartridges, and they said it would take several days to get new ones. And despite the farmer considering having the cow shot dead, the political leader in the town reportedly stated that the cow will live out its life in peace. So the politician then decided, that he would offer to pay for the quote-unquote hero cow to be saved from death. And then he said, or someone said, she escaped heroically and infiltrated the island in the middle of the lake where it remains today, end quote. And she did not, and then this other person said she did not succumb to firefighters who wanted to transport her by boat, and she was still on the battlefield. I'm not sure what that means anyway. And the politician lastly said, I am not a vegetarian, but fortitude and the will to fight for this cow's life is invaluable. Therefore, I decided to do everything to cause the cow to be delivered to a safe place, and in the second stage, as a reward for her attitude, give her a guarantee of a long retirement and natural death, end quote. So that's basically the this article. And I hope you can all hear me there. Oh, yes. Okay. I just wanted to check this live stream. I had a bit of trouble when I tried to interview Ajama Baraka on Friday night. I had some there was some tech issues, and I still don't know why that happened. Because I have somebody who's very good at tech stuff with me at the time, and we couldn't work it out. Anyway, so I'm glad you can hear me. Anyhow, so this is an interesting thing, isn't it? That here we are, our lives are surrounded by animal products, and animal consumption is like breathing to us, really, isn't it? It becomes so normalized. It's become normalized because we've been, indoctrinated to believe right from when we're young. And I say this over and over again, but we're read sweet little stories about sweet little cows and pigs and goats and hens on farms. And it's like, and we're anthropomorphizing them. They're all talking to one another, and it's as if there is no violence that happens on the farm. No animals are taken from them, like in, when for dairy reasons. I mean, in the dairy industry, male calves are regularly taken from their mothers at a day or two old and taken to slaughterhouses and killed. They can barely walk, and they're dragged across the slaughterhouse floor, and they're often sucking on the fingers of the slaughterhouse workers, and that's a regular thing for the dairy industry. People don't think there's any harm in dairy, and I could go on about that, but I will in another live stream. I'll just talk about dairy. I think I've already talked about it a little bit already, and I'll leave a link to what's wrong with dairy. And eggs are the same. Male chicks are thrown alive into macerators and ground up alive, and so millions of chicks and millions of male calves, they're all killed. And eventually, in the dairy industry, eventually mother cows who repeatedly have their children stolen from them, and then they cry for a couple of days, distraught. This is a regular thing. And eventually the mother calves, their lives are shortened too, and they are killed as well. So in mother cows in the dairy industry. So that's something to remember. But anyway, this particular cow, I don't know if this cow was going to be killed for meat, for her flesh, or if she was just a dairy cow that was who was no longer productive. Who knows? But anyway, this is what happens at the end to all animals who are no longer productive, or whatever the reason. That's their life is just to do with what we wish. So I was just going to show you a couple of I'll show you first of all the picture of the image of the cow who managed to save herself. And I mean, the reason that this is happening, the reason that cow is there in the first place, is because we are not vegan. So that's the cow who managed to save herself and was just one of the fortunate ones. And yet she still has to, even though cows, like to be in a herd. I mean, we're humans and we're sentient too. We're animals as well. We like to, we like to have company as well. And I'm sure she would like to have company, but here she is on this island in the middle of a lake, and, she's by herself. And that's tragic, really, because I'm sure she would like company. And who knows when that politician leaves, if he leaves or changes his mind, or somebody goes to the island and decides to, kill her or whatever, or take her, nothing's going to happen because she's viewed as property. So we can pretty much do what we like with property. Just as a few hundred years ago, people could do what they liked with humans who were slaves and who were considered property. This is the same thing. And even though human slavery still exists today, it's viewed as immoral. And one day, the exploitation and killing and torturing of sentient animals will also be viewed as immoral. It's already going that way, because I've mentioned in other live streams that veganism is exponentially growing, and even the market recognizes that now, and they're encouraging large corporations to start providing vegan alternatives for people. Not that people need to buy pre-made food from anywhere, but this just indicates how veganism is no longer a fringe philosophy. It's no longer fringe at all. It's becoming mainstream. So, this is a good thing, because where we have one form of discrimination, one form of injustice against sentient beings, we will have all forms. These sorts of things never remain in a vacuum. The sort of discrimination and violence toward, there's a few sayings. Tolstoy once said, where we have slaughterhouses, we will have battlefields. And somebody else, I'm not sure who it was, I think it was a Jewish writer, he said, Auschwitz begins the day that we say they're only animals. These are the things. It's like discrimination and violence. It never stays in a vacuum. And you only have to see today what we're doing to brown people overseas in the name of imperialism, in the name of hegemony and resources. We otherize them to the point so we can take their land and kill them. And the same happens, the same is happening in relation to Russia. You see plenty of demonization and otherization and vilification of Russia. And that's so that, we in the West can then do what we like, invade Russia or bomb them with nukes, and then, have hegemony in that region. So before one actually commits acts of violence against another group, it's always, what always prefaces that is a otherization, a demonization, a vilification. And of course, we see that ongoing with non-human animals, that we talk about them like they're lesser, like they have no, like they have no real sentience, except for animals that we fetishize, like cats and dogs or dolphins or whales or whatever. We selectively compartmentalize, we morally compartmentalize and say, those animals are sentient, we need to protect them. Or the dog and cat whom we live with, they're family members, in quotes. But then we pretend like the animals that are on our plates or whom we were wearing or whatever, that they don't have any sentience. I mean, the compartmentalization, it's truly astounding, isn't it? And yet, I mean, I was vegan for 45 years of my life. I've been I've been non-vegan for 45 years of my life, and then I've been vegan for 13 years. And for those 45 years of my life, I would do all I could to sort of to make, for example, I would, if ever I heard about some animal being treated badly, or a dog or a cat, or if I heard about a cow escaping a slaughterhouse or whatever, or somebody was, abusing an animal, I was horrified, and I would do what I could to intervene. And yet then I would sit down to animal products, dairy and eggs and flesh and whatever. And yet I thought that I cared about animals. I thought that I as a good person, that I was a fair person, that I cared about animals. No, I cared about certain animals. I cared about animals that were, it was a compartmentalization, and I didn't even think really. I rarely thought about the animals that I was eating on my plate. I just didn't think about it, which is really scary to me. It's scary because I don't know if I am, but I consider myself a reasonably thoughtful person. And yet the speciesism was so thick with me. The speciesism was so huge, and the indoctrination was so profound that even though I was eating animal products, I could not see them, that I could not see the connection to the sentient animals who are in the fields or in the feedlots or whatever. I did not connect it. And maybe there were glimpses of it occasionally with me, but I was sort of going with the herd mentality, which is we use animals, don't we? And they're here for us to use. They're lesser. They're stupid, in quotes, a lot of them. They're not like us, and therefore they're lesser. Why do they have to be like us? They have their own abilities. They have incredible abilities, really, that we don't have. Does that make them better than us? or superior. No, it just makes them different. And our species has such a problem with difference, doesn't it? Really, I mean, we have a problem with difference within our own species. And we do it all the time. Our minds are clicking over. We go out, we see people who maybe we don't like the look of for some bizarre reason, and things are going on in our head. They must be this, they must be that. You know, we're making sort of critical judgments all the time about our own species based on maybe what they look like, based on an ethnicity, based on sexual orientation or gender diversity. You know, I mean, I've been sort of on the receiving end because I'm from the LGBTI community, and I've had to deal with the homophobia all my life. In fact, recently they had a survey. They call it a vote, but they had a survey which sort of asked the question: do you think same-sex couples should be allowed to marry? Now, can you imagine somebody asking you that question, and you have to fill it out, and everybody in the country got that survey, and then they released the vote, which was, I think, 65% in Australia believe that same-sex people should be allowed to marry. Well, seriously, how offensive is that? Democracy should not be, the majority should not be allowed to dictate the rights of a minority group. But, this is the thing. This is what discrimination does. It otherizes. So I've been otherized, but I'm not a black person. I could be a black person. I could be a black trans woman, couldn't I? And in the United States, black trans women are killed regularly. So, it's like, but what my point is, otherization is the cause of violence, and it doesn't remain in a vacuum. And what we do to non-human animals eventually will be done to all of us. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I'll just show you this, which I made a little image a while ago. It has a image of a cat, but this is basically, you could apply this to anyone, any animal. So viewing sentient beings, non-human or human, as other and therefore lesser is at the center of most of the violence in the world. Respect difference, go vegan. So, and I wanted to show you this other image too, which is something that I always want people to think about, that we need to think about. Oh, here's one more which sorry, I'm flicking through images there. It takes effort to ignore the obvious sentience of non-human animals. So just hold on a moment. Anyway, and there's one more that I wanted to show. It's basically about humane, the idea of humane. This one here. So non-humans don't need our mercy. They don't need our compassion or kindness. They just need us to go vegan and stop using them. I mean, because a lot of people go, oh, if only we treated them, if we treat them better, then it'll be okay to use them. There's as if there's, nice or better ways, in quotes, to do the wrong thing. When something's wrong, like veganism is an ethical position, it rejects using animals for food. That's, meat, dairy, eggs, honey, and clothing. That's leather, wool, fur, silk, etc., entertainment, and other reasons. It's an ethical position which rejects using sentient animals as property, as things. We recognize their moral personhood, and that simply means that we don't view them as a thing. So, and they belong to the moral community, and they are 99.99% of the planet's population. So basically, we talk about white supremacy today, and yes, that's a real thing and that's a real problem. But we also have the problem of human supremacy, and that is a tremendous problem and is creating tremendous violence. 1 trillion land and aquatic animals are killed and tortured and killed every year. simply because we are not vegan, simply because we've been indoctrinated to believe they are things, they are here for us to use. But they are fellow earthlings on this planet. And I tell you, and I really wish I could do a mind meld. I wish I could do a mind meld with everybody who's watching here right now and anybody who happens to watch this in the future and transmit how great it is to finally sort of basically release oneself from this speciesist haze. Because I could have gone through my whole life, and I went through enough of my life in ignorance about it, enough of my life participating in tremendous violence. And I feel like I've been released from something that I didn't even know I was a prisoner of. And that and that's why it's so important. I wish that I could transmit the joy of what it's like to become vegan, and that it only gets better as time goes by. And the only regret that vegans have, usually, these are the ones that are the real vegans that become vegan for ethical reasons. Okay, not people that are adopting a plant-based diet to lose weight or whatever they're doing. I'm talking about the ethical position. The only regret people have is that they didn't become vegan sooner, and that's the truth. And it's becoming easier and easier to be vegan because it's, there's more and more alternatives if that's what you want. I don't bother buying pre-made food, but it's becoming more and more. It's becoming easier and easier, and most people sort of know what it is now. When I became vegan 13 years ago, that wasn't so much the case. In fact, I don't think I'd ever met a vegan. I'd met people that were vegetarian, but unfortunately vegetarianism still involves eating, wearing, and using animals. So it's really nowhere. But I'd never really met a vegan. And so I had to do, some research online, and I'm so grateful to whoever posted that article about dairy and what happens in the dairy industry, because it was so shocking, the usual runnings of a dairy industry, that snapped me into it. I said to my partner, we have to go vegan because this is totally unacceptable. And obviously, if this is happening in the dairy industry, it's probably happening in all industries, and turned out it was just awful, 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 totally unacceptable. And so we went vegan. But I mean, and I thank that person, whoever they were, that posted that thing about dairy. So, people get it can be confronting. I think people sort of at time, depending where they are in their life, it might take a few messages. It might take 100 messages. It might take one message. In my case, I think I'd been over time, just little glimpses of what I was doing, and then it would go away, and I'd just stick with the herd mentality. And then finally something happened. I got the shock of what I was actually participating in. And sometimes it's just like that, you might hear a message over and over and over again, and then finally it gets through, or you might only have to hear it once. Boom, there it is. And then you think, oh, this is then the shock of it is that you've been going along with this idea that's totally false, and that is sort of having such a tremendous effect on other sentient animals' lives, that their lives are being destroyed, their families are being taken from them, they're being repeatedly raped, repeatedly raped, artificially inseminated, and all sorts of dreadful things. They're having their tails chopped off without anesthetic. This is normal. They're having their genitals cut off without anesthetic. This is normal. All these things, are just normal in this so-called humane, these humane industries. And the mom and pop farms are not much better, because they end up killing those animals. They take their children from them. It wouldn't be profitable if they didn't do that sort of thing. So, whether it's a mom and pop farm or a quote-unquote factory farm, because all these farms now, including the so-called free range, are all just big industrialized warehouses. It's just a scam to sell animal products. Whatever it is, we just don't have the right to use these sentient animals as things. We really don't. And it's so unnecessary. It's so unnecessary. So I implore anybody who's watching this to think about going vegan, and don't think about cutting things out, like cutting out bacon or cutting out eggs, or, and doing it over time. Because when we realize something's wrong, right? When we realize, say, for example, that racism is wrong, we don't sort of like say, well, I'm only going to be racist 4 times a week, and then the other 3 times I'm not. We reject racism, hopefully, and then we recognize that something's wrong, and so we reject it all. And the same goes with veganism. Speciesism is a cause of tremendous violence and killing, and we're responsible because we're not vegan. It's not the corporations or the anything like that. It's not corporations, and it's not animal industry that are responsible. We are responsible. Just like we say all the time, it's in our hands. It's in our hands. It's not the corporations that are responsible. We create demand. It's simple economics. We create demand. They supply us with the animal products. And it's not going to get any better. The industrialized farming is only going to increase because of the population increase on the planet. And I'll just show you a little thing of what goes on, just to show you the tremendous impact that animal agriculture has on the planet. And this involves humans too, the impact on humans. Let me just flick that off for a sec. Every day, a person who is vegan will save 1,100 gallons of water, 20 pounds of CO2 equivalent, 30 square feet of forested land, 45 pounds of grain, and prevents the torture and killing of at least 1 sentient animal every day. That's every day. The most important thing is that it prevents the torture and killing of at least 1 sentient animal every day. So, this is something that we also need to consider as the environmental impact. 51% of greenhouse gases are from animal agriculture. And we can quibble about the percentage, but if you look into the World Watch Institute report, they and other reports that have been since, animal agriculture is creating dead zones in the ocean, 95,000 square kilometers of dead zones in the ocean. That's from the runoff from these farms. And it's, the impact in general is just outrageous. I mean, look at the amount of water it's just outrageous, particularly in the drought-ridden areas. So, but, the most important reason to be vegan is because of sentient animals and their right. Just like that cow who escaped that slaughterhouse, broke the arm of that person trying to get them, sort of swam to an island. I mean, how dreadful is that? When I read that, I just thought, God, this is all so unnecessary. It's just so unnecessary, and it's so sad. It's so unbelievably sad. And we will never know the trauma and the tremendous trauma and the tremendous, the stories, the terrible stories of families being separated and killed and everything. It eclipses any of the violence that we've done to ourselves by far. And it's all for completely trivial reasons. So, I implore you to think about becoming vegan. Forget about the baby steps and the journeys and all of that stuff that large animal organizations tell people to do. And they're just businesses, remember. Large animal organizations are businesses, and they're more interested now in their bottom line than they are in sort of actually people going vegan. They rarely ask people to go vegan, and it's in there somewhere, but it's basically they're constantly telling people there are better ways to use animals. Usually they speak out of both sides of their mouth. So, I don't endorse any large animal organizations, any animal organizations really, because once it becomes a business, you know how everything gets watered down. If they ever started off thinking that animals are the most important thing, and that includes PETA, it ends up as it's just a watered down, moral, confused mess. So let's forget about what animal organizations say and all those silly things they promote about cutting back and meat-free Mondays and all that sort of stuff, because it's still, if we recognize something's wrong, let's just reject it. And let's think about that cow in Poland who went to all those tremendous lengths to preserve her life, because her life is valuable to her. Her life means everything to her, just like it means everything to each one of us. We would fight as much as we could to preserve our life. And that animal, that cow, who is just another animal like we are. We're no more important than she is. She's no more important than we are. We're equally morally important. She loves life just like we do, and she does not want to die. And just like we do, that she has the value for her life. And, and let's think about that cow every time we sit down to eat. Let's think about not eating animal products that are products of violence. Let's look into this issue. And I'll give you this, my vegan podcast. It's a comprehensive vegan podcast. It's about ethics, but there is stuff about nutrition, and it's fascinating. There's so many people, just putting aside for a moment the ethics, so many people could save their health if they became vegan. My health has never been better, and there are a lot of people, when I see the health conditions they have, I think, I wish that I could, well, firstly, I wish I could get them to recognize the ethics of veganism, but then I wish that I could transmit how literally a lot of conditions can be completely reversed by adopting a plant-based diet. And you can find out more on howtogovegan.org about that. So anyway, I want to leave you with this little image that I made. And I really think that, there's this saying by Thich Nhat Hanh. He says, we are here to awaken from our illusion of separateness. And that's true. I really think that. I like Buddhist philosophy, and that illusion of separateness is at the base of all the violence that we see today. And if a vegan planet, which is possible, if we have a vegan planet and we actually care about not only the non-human animals, that I talk about here, but if we care about little tiny insects and small animals, can you imagine? We won't really want to be racing out and hurting other, human animals. We won't be wanting to torture them and kill them. If we care about little tiny insects and other animals whom are very vulnerable, then we're really not going to be wanting to start wars and go around rampaging and killing for resources and hegemony. I think it will change our mindset. So our illusion of separateness, we need to break through that. And one of the ways that we can do that is to go vegan. So please think about that. So I'll leave you with that. And my name's Trisha Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Till next time. Bye for now.